A new beginning. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the observation deck of Xyloth Station, staring out at the swirling blue-green nebula that filled the viewport. The colors here on the edge of Xylothian space were more vibrant, more alive than anything back in the Sol system. Yet even this awe-inspiring vista couldn't lift the weight pressing down on his heart. Jake's eyes were drawn to the sleek, angular ships of the Xylothian merchant fleet drifting by the station. Ships that, until yesterday, had been commanded by his best friend and business partner, Xyloth. The alien had taken a chance on a brash young human pilot 2 decades ago, back when humans were still newcomers on the galactic stage. That chance meeting in a rough Kuiper Belt mining camp had grown into a friendship that transcended species, a partnership that had carved out a successful niche in the competitive world of interstellar shipping. And now Xyloth was gone, struck down by a sudden illness that even the most advanced alien medicine couldn't cure. Jake clenched his fist, feeling the roughness of his workman's hands, so different from Xyloth's smooth, scaled skin. 20 years of laughter, of shared struggles and triumphs, ended in a sterile hospital room. The sound of footsteps echoed on the deck plates behind him. Jake turned to see a tall, slender Xylothian approaching, her movements graceful even in the slightly higher gravity of the station. Iridescent scales in shades of lavender and silver covered her face and hands, reflecting the nebula's light. "Captain Sullivan," she said, her voice carrying a melodic accent. "I am Amara, Xyloth's wife. We met briefly at the ceremony yesterday." Jake nodded, recalling the somber gathering in the Great Hall, hundreds of Xylothians joined by a smattering of humans and other aliens to pay respects to the fallen merchant prince. He had only glimpsed Amara then, a silent, regal figure draped in translucent robes. "My condolences on your loss, ma'am," Jake said, the words feeling inadequate. Xyloth was. He was the best friend I ever had. Amara's large, liquid eyes met his. "And you were his, Captain. He spoke of you often, of your adventures together. In many ways, he considered you a brother." She stepped closer, the nebula's light playing across her features. "That is why I asked you here. Xyloth's death was unexpected. He had much unfinished business, plans for the future of the company, plans that involved you." Jake frowned, unsure where this was going. "Me? I'm just a pilot, ma'am." Xyloth was the one with the head for business. "And yet he trusted no one more than you." Amara produced a small crystalline data chip, holding it out to him. "This was found among his personal effects. It is addressed to you." Jake took the chip with a trembling hand. Xyloth's last message to him. He slotted it into his wrist computer, the device's holoprojector humming to life. A small translucent image of Xyloth materialized above his arm, the alien's face lined with age but eyes still bright. "Jake, my friend," the recording began, Xyloth's deep, rasping voice so familiar it made Jake's chest ache. "If you are seeing this, then I have embarked on the final voyage from which none return. I have no regrets, for I have lived a full life, rich in experience and friendship, and no friendship has meant more to me than ours." The hologram flickered, Xyloth's image seeming to gather itself. "I built my company on trust, Jake. Trust in my crew, my ships, and most of all in you. That's why I'm entrusting my life's work to you. As of this moment, you are the new owner and CEO of Xyloth Shipping." Jake nearly staggered back, shock rolling through him. Owner? CEO? He was a cargo hauler, not a corporate executive. As if sensing his reaction, Xyloth's recording chuckled. "I know this must come as a shock, but there is no one I would rather have at the helm. You have the instincts, the boldness to lead this company into the future. The board will advise you, and Amara will be at your side, trusting yourself as I have trusted in you." The hologram turned, as if just now noticing Amara's presence. Its expression softened. "Ah, Amara, my shining star, I am sorry to leave you so soon, but know that you will not be alone." It turned back to Jake, eyes intense. "Jake, there is a custom among my people, a dying request that cannot be denied. I ask you now to honor that request." Ice trickled down Jake's spine. What was Xyloth asking of him? I ask you to take Amara as your wife, to guide and protect her as I no longer can. The world seemed to tilt around Jake, the deck plates shifting beneath his feet. Amara watched him steadily, her expression unreadable. I know it is much to ask, Xyloth continued, but there is no one I trust more with her well-being. With the company's well-being, the path ahead will not be easy. Rivals and enemies abound, and they will see my passing as weakness. You must be strong together. The hologram stretched out a hand, as if trying to bridge the gap of time and death. The choice is yours, my friend, as it must be. But know that whatever you decide, I am proud to have called you brother. May the stellar winds guide you true. With a final, sad smile, the hologram dissolved into motes of light, leaving Jake and Amara alone on the observation deck, the nebula casting shifting colors across their faces. Jake struggled to find words, his mind of pearl with the enormity of Xyloth's request. CEO of a sprawling shipping empire. Husband to an alien woman he barely knew. It was too much, too sudden. And yet, could he refuse? Xyloth had given him everything, a career, a purpose, a friendship that transcended the void. If this was his final wish, how could Jake deny him? He turned to Amara, seeing his own confusion and uncertainty mirrored in her luminous eyes. I don't know what to say, he managed. This is also overwhelming, she finished, a wry smile curving her lips. Believe me, I understand. Xyloth always did have a flair for the dramatic. She took a step closer, her gaze searching his face. I know we are strangers, Captain Sullivan, bound by the whims of a man we both loved. I will not force you into a marriage you do not want. Jake took a deep breath, the scent of starship fuel and recycled air filling his lungs. I made a promise to Xyloth once, he said slowly. That I would always have his back, no matter what. I can't break that promise now. He straightened, squaring his shoulders. If you're willing, ma'am, I'll do my best to honor Xyloth's request. To lead this company and to be a good husband to you. Though I'll admit I don't know much about Xylothian marriage customs. Amara's smile widened, a hint of mischief sparkling in her eyes. Then it seems we both have much to learn, Captain, about each other and the challenges ahead. She extended a slender hand, the scales glittering under the lights. Shall we begin this journey together, then? Not as strangers, but as partners. Jake hesitated only a moment before clasping her hand in his, feeling the alien coolness of her skin against his palm. Partners, he agreed, a flicker of excitement mingling with the trepidation in his chest. As they stood there, hands joined, the nebula's endless dance of color and light playing out before them, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was only the beginning. A beginning of something vast, uncharted, and utterly unexpected. But then, wasn't that what drew him to the stars in the first place? The thrill of the unknown, the promise of new frontiers. With Amara at his side and Xyloth's legacy to uphold, he would face whatever the galaxy threw at them. After all, he was Jake Sullivan, starship pilot, friend, and now, it seemed, husband and CEO. The black, it seemed, was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Danger strikes. Jake stood on the bridge of the Zephyr, the sleek Xylothian freighter that had been Xyloth's pride and joy. The ship sliced through the void, its quantum drive thrumming with barely restrained power. Around him, the alien crew worked with efficient precision, their scales glinting under the console's soft glow. It had been a whirlwind few weeks since Xyloth's funeral and the shocking revelation of Jake's new role. Between poring over financial reports, meeting with the board, and learning the intricacies of Xylothian culture from Amara, Jake's head was spinning. But this, standing on the bridge of a starship, watching the cosmos unfold before him, this felt right. This felt like home. Captain, Amara's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood at his side, resplendent in a form-fitting flight suit that shimmered with each movement. We're approaching the Thalassar system. The Emporium is expecting our shipment of Aurelian silks. Jake nodded, consulting the glowing display on his command chair. The Thalassar Emporium was one of the grandest trading hubs in the sector, a glittering space station orbiting a massive gas giant. Xyloth Shipping had a lucrative contract with the Emporium, one Jake was determined to fulfill. But as the Zephyr decelerated towards the system's outer reaches, a blaring alarm split the air. The viewscreen flickered, resolving into an image that sent a chill down Jake's spine. A jagged, angular ship hung in space before them, its hull bristling with vicious-looking weaponry. It bore down on the Zephyr like a predator closing in for the kill. Shields up. Evasive maneuvers. Jake barked, adrenaline surging through his veins. The crew leaped to obey, their fingers flying over the consoles. The attacking ship opened fire, lances of searing energy slashing through the void. The Zephyr shuddered as its shields absorbed the brunt of the assault, the deck plates vibrating beneath Jake's feet. "Who the hell are these guys?" he demanded, gripping the arms of his chair as another volley rocked the ship. Amara's eyes narrowed, her features hardening. "That's a Draxorian raider," she said grimly. "They're mercenaries and pirates, loyal to the highest bidder. And I have a pretty good idea who that bidder might be." Jake's mind raced, recalling the dossiers he'd reviewed on Xyloth Shipping's competitors. One name had stood out, Draxor, a ruthless shipping magnate who had clashed with Xyloth for years. The two had been locked in a bitter feud, fighting for control of the most lucrative trade routes. "You think Draxor is behind this attack?" Jake asked, the Zephyr's engines howling as the pilot threw the ship into a dizzying corkscrew. Amara nodded tightly. He's always been jealous of Xyloth's success. With Xyloth gone, he probably sees an opportunity to take what he's always wanted. Jake's jaw clenched, anger boiling in his gut. This Draxor was a coward, striking from the shadows rather than facing them head-on. But Jake Sullivan was no easy target. He'd faced down raiders and pirates before, in the lawless fringes of human space. "All right, enough of this," he growled. "Helm, bring us about. Tactical, lock weapons on that raider. Let's show them what happens when you mess with Xyloth Shipping." The crew responded with a fierce cheer, their fear melting away in the face of their captain's resolve. The Zephyr swung around, its own weapons bristling to life. Brilliant beams of plasma lanced out, stitching across the raiders' shields. The Draxorian ship staggered under the assault, its shields flickering. It tried to return fire, but the Zephyr was already moving, dancing out of reach with graceful agility. Jake felt a fierce grin stretching his lips, the old thrill of combat singing in his blood. But even as they pummeled the raider, another alarm blared across the bridge. "Captain," the sensor operator called, her voice tight with urgency. "We have multiple contacts dropping out of warp. More raiders." Jake cursed under his breath. One ship they could handle, but a whole squadron. The Zephyr was a freighter, not a battlecruiser. They were outgunned and outmatched. Amara leaned in close, her voice low and urgent. "Jake, we can't win this fight. We need to get out of here now." Jake hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to stand and fight. But he knew Amara was right. The Zephyr and her crew were his responsibility now. He couldn't risk their lives for the sake of his own pride. "Helm, plot an emergency jump," he ordered, his voice booming across the bridge. "Get us out of here." The raider closed in, its weapons hammering at the Zephyr's straining shields. The freighter shook like a leaf in a hurricane, consoles sparking and crew members clinging to their stations. Jake gritted his teeth, willing the quantum drive to charge faster. Just as the shields collapsed, the stars outside the viewscreen stretched and distorted. With a gut-wrenching lurch, the Zephyr leaped into warp, leaving the raiders and the Thalassar system behind in a blaze of pseudo-motion. Silence descended on the bridge, broken only by the soft bleeping of damage reports and the crew's ragged breathing. Jake slumped back in his chair, his heart pounding against his ribs. They had escaped, but only just. And now they had a new enemy, one who wouldn't rest until he had seized control of Xyloth's empire. Amara rested a hand on Jake's shoulder, her touch cool and steadying. "Draxa has made his move," she said softly. "This is only the beginning." Jake covered her hand with his own, feeling the strength and determination flowing between them. "Then we'll be ready for him," he vowed. "Whatever it takes, we'll protect what Zoloth built. Together." The crew around them nodded, their eyes glinting with resolve. They had signed on to serve under Captain Sullivan and Lady Amara, and they would follow them into the jaws of hell itself if need be. As the Zephyr hurtled through the shimmering veil of warp space, Jake knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But with his crew, his ship, and Amara at his side, he felt a flicker of hope amid the chaos. Draxa wanted a war. Then Jake Sullivan would give him one, and he wouldn't rest until Zoloth's shipping, and Zoloth's legacy, was safe from those who sought to tear it down. The stars blurred past, distant suns and worlds streaking by in a kaleidoscope of light, and the Zephyr flew on, carrying its valiant crew into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges the vast, uncharted expanse of space had in store. Corporate warfare. The Zephyr limped into the sprawling shipyards of Galaxis Prime, its hull scored with blast marks and its shields barely holding together. As the massive orbital dry docks enveloped the wounded freighter, Jake could only watch in frustrated silence. Every hour spent in repairs was another hour Draxa had to scheme and plot against them. The Draxorian warlord had already proven his ruthlessness with a brazen attack in the Thalassar system. Jake knew it was only a matter of time before he struck again. Amara stood at Jake's side, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen as worker drones swarmed over the Zephyr's damaged hull. "We can't keep running," she said softly. "Sooner or later, Draxa will catch us." And then, she didn't need to finish the thought. Jake had seen the aftermath of Draxorian raids before: shattered ships, slaughtered crews, cargo holds stripped bare. He wouldn't let that happen to his people, not while there was still breath in his body. "You're right," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "It's time we take the fight to Draxa. Hit him where it hurts." Amara turned to him, her eyebrows arched in surprise. "What do you have in mind?" Jake called up a glowing holomap of the sector, the stars and systems orbiting lazily above the bridge. "Drax's power comes from his wealth," he explained, jabbing a finger at a pulsing red icon. "And the heart of that wealth is his main shipping hub, right here in the Coraxis system. If we can infiltrate the hub and sabotage his operations, we can cripple his ability to wage war against us." Amara studied the map, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "It won't be easy," she warned. "Drax's security will be tighter than a Tellusian's grip on a credit chip. We'll need a plan." Jake felt a grin tugging at his lips, the old thrill of a challenge sparking in his chest. "Good thing we've got a genius Zolothian strategist on our side then, and a daring human captain who's not afraid to take some risks." Amara's answering smile was fierce and bright, her eyes glinting with anticipation. "Then let's get to work, Captain. We have a warlord to outwit." Over the next few days, as the Zephyr underwent its repairs, Jake and Amara pored over every scrap of data they could gather on Drax's shipping hub. They analyzed security patrols, mapped out cargo routes, and studied the complex dance of ships and containers that flowed through the massive space station. Bit by bit, a plan began to take shape. A plan that would require all of Jake's piloting skills, Amara's diplomatic savvy, and a healthy dose of old-fashioned human ingenuity. When the Zephyr finally emerged from the dry docks, its hull gleaming and its systems fully restored, Jake called the crew together in the cargo bay. He looked out over the sea of alien faces, seeing determination and loyalty etched in every scale and tentacle. "I won't lie to you," he began, his voice ringing out in the cavernous space. "What we're about to attempt is dangerous. We'll be flying straight into the heart of enemy territory, risking everything to strike a blow against Draxa." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But I also know that each and every one of you signed on to serve with Zoloth Shipping because you believed in something. You believed in a company that stood for honor, for fair dealing, for the idea that the stars belong to everyone, not just the strongest or the most ruthless. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, heads nodding and fists clenching. Xyloth believed in us, Jake continued, his voice rising with passion. He believed in our strength, our courage, our ability to face any challenge the galaxy could throw at us. And now it's time for us to honor that belief. It's time for us to show Draxa, and the whole damn universe, what Xyloth shipping is made of. The crew erupted in a roar of approval, their voices echoing off the bulkheads. Amara stood at Jake's side, her hands slipping into his, their fingers intertwining. In that moment, Jake felt a surge of pride and love so strong it nearly took his breath away. This was his family now, his crew, his wife, his purpose, and he would fight to his last breath to protect them. As the Zephyr set out for the Coraxis system, Jake felt a sense of calm settle over him, the calm of a man who knows his path, who has found something worth fighting for. Let Draxa scheme and plot. Let him send his raiders and his mercenaries. Jake Sullivan and the crew of the Zephyr would be ready for them. They would strike from the shadows, using every trick and tactic in their arsenal to undermine the warlord's power. And when the time came for the final confrontation, they would face Draxa with their heads held high, united in their resolve to protect the legacy of a man who had brought them all together. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and filled with promise, and the Zephyr flew on, carrying the hopes and dreams of a small, brave band of misfits who dared to stand against the tide of greed and oppression. Come what may, they would face it together. For Xyloth, for each other, and for the future they were determined to build among the stars. An uneasy alliance. The Zephyr ghosted through the Coraxis system, its sleek hull blending seamlessly into the inky void. On the bridge, Jake and Amaro watched the viewscreen intently, their eyes scanning the swerving nebulae and glittering star fields for any sign of trouble. They had made it this far without detection, thanks to Amaro's intricate understanding of Draxorian patrol patterns and Jake's deft piloting. But as they approached Draxa's primary shipping hub, a massive space station bristling with weaponry and swarming with activity, they knew the real challenge was just beginning. "All right, people," Jake said, his voice tight with anticipation. "This is it. Our one shot to throw a spanner in Draxa's works. Everyone knows their role." Around the bridge, heads nodded and claws flexed on consoles. They had drilled this plan 100 times, each crew member honing their part to perfection. Amara stepped forward, her hand resting on the ornate hilt of the ceremonial dagger at her hip. As the head of Xyloth shipping and a respected figure in Xylothian society, her role was to distract and disorient, using her diplomatic status to gain access to the station's upper levels. Meanwhile, Jake and a hand-picked team of infiltrators would slip in through the cargo bays, their objective to sabotage the station's critical systems and download as much intel on Draxa's operations as possible. It was a high-stakes game of deception and subterfuge, with the fate of Xyloth shipping hanging in the balance. But as he looked around at his crew, at the determination and courage shining in their alien eyes, Jake knew there was no one else he'd rather have at his side. "All right, Zephyr," he murmured, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Let's do this." With a burst of its powerful engines, the Zephyr surged forward, angling toward the glittering behemoth of the station. As they approached, Amara opened a channel, her voice ringing with authority. "This is Lady Amara of House Xyloth, requesting permission to dock. I have urgent business to discuss with your station master." There was a moment of tense silence, the bridge crew holding their collective breath. Then, grudgingly, the docking bay doors began to slide open, the station's automated systems recognizing Amara's diplomatic credentials. Jake felt a fierce grin tug at his lips. They were in. The next few hours passed in a blur of tense, covert action, while Amara swept through the station's lavish upper decks, drawing all eyes with her regal bearing and shimmering gown. Jake and his team crept through the guts of the cargo bays, planting explosive charges and hacking into data terminals with lightning speed. It was exhilarating, thrilling work, the kind of high-stakes espionage that set Jake's blood singing in his veins. But even as they worked, an uneasy feeling began to gnaw at the back of his mind. This was all going too smoothly. Draxa was too cunning, too paranoid to leave his most vital hubs so vulnerable. What if? Suddenly, alarms began to blare throughout the station, the harsh klaxons echoing through the cavernous cargo bays. Jake's heart seized in his chest. They'd been discovered. All teams, abort. He barked into his comm, already racing back toward the Zephyr. Get back to the ship now. But even as he ran, he knew it was too late. Draxorian security forces were pouring into the bays, their weapons bristling and their eyes glinting with predatory hunger. They had walked straight into a trap. Jake and his team fought like demons, their blasters spitting fire and their fists and feet lashing out in a desperate dance of survival. But they were hopelessly outnumbered, the enemy pressing in from all sides. Just as all seemed lost, a brilliant lance of energy split the air, vaporizing a score of Draxorian soldiers where they stood. Jake's head snapped up, his eyes widening in disbelief. Hovering above the chaos, its hull gleaming in the stark light of the cargo bay, was a ship unlike any he had ever seen. Sleek and predatory, with an almost organic curve to its lines, it bore the unmistakable markings of the Terran Navy. "Attention Draxorian forces," a voice boomed from the ship's external speakers. "This is Captain Nora Vance of the TNS Retribution. Stand down immediately or be destroyed." Jake's jaw dropped. The Terran Navy, here? But how? And then he saw her, standing tall and proud on the Retribution's bridge, her dark hair whipping in the recycled breeze. Captain Nora Vance, his old friend, his one-time lover, the woman he'd left behind when he'd struck out for the stars all those years ago. She met his gaze through the viewscreen, her eyes flashing with a mixture of exasperation, relief, and something softer, something that made Jake's heart ache with forgotten longing. As the Draxorian forces fell back in the face of the Retribution's overwhelming firepower, Jake could only stare, his mind reeling. The past had caught up with him in the most unexpected way possible. And now, with Nora and the might of the Terran Navy at his side, the fight against Draxa had just been kicked into a whole new gear. The question was, were they ready for the consequences? As the Zephyr and the Retribution sewed away from the crippled station, Jake knew one thing for certain. The game had changed, the stakes higher than ever before, and the fate of the galaxy might just rest in the hands of two old flames, reunited by chance among the stars. The adventure was only just beginning. The final confrontation. The bridge of the Zephyr was a hive of activity, a blur of alien bodies and urgent chatter as the crew prepared for the fight of their lives. Jake stood at the center of it all, his eyes locked on the viewscreen, his heart pounding in his chest. Beside him, Nora and Amara stood shoulder to shoulder, two powerful women united by a common cause. In the days since the Retribution's dramatic rescue at Draxa's shipping hub, the three of them had forged an uneasy alliance, pooling their resources and their knowledge to plan a final decisive strike against the Draxorian warlord. It hadn't been easy. Old tensions and new jealousies had threatened to tear them apart, the weight of their shared history and their uncertain future bearing down on them like a collapsing star. But in the end, their commitment to justice, to protecting the innocent and preserving the legacy of Xyloth shipping, had proven stronger than any personal drama. And now, as the combined fleet of the Zephyr, the Retribution, and a ragtag assortment of allied ships dropped out of warp on the edge of the Draxorian home system, Jake knew that all their sacrifices, all their struggles, had been leading to this moment. "All ships, report in," he barked, his voice steady and strong over the comm. One by one, the captains of their makeshift armada checked in, their voices filled with grim determination. They were outnumbered and outgunned, facing the full might of the Draxorian war machine. But they had something Draxa could never understand, something he could never defeat: the unbreakable bonds of friendship, of love, of a shared purpose that transcended species and star systems. As the enemy fleet came into view, a writhing mass of jagged metal and bristling weaponry, Jake felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. This was his destiny, his calling. To stand against the darkness, to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. He glanced at Amara, at the fierce, proud beauty of her face, the glint of her silver eyes. She met his gaze, her lips curving in a small, private smile. No words were needed. They had already said everything that mattered, in the whispered moments between battles, in the brush of their hands and the mingling of their breath. He turned to Nora, seeing the steel in her spine, the fire in her eyes. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. There would be time for talk later, for apologies and explanations, and perhaps, if the stars were kind, for a chance to start anew. But for now, there was only the fight, only the desperate, glorious struggle to safeguard the future they had all dreamed of. "All right, people," Jake said, his voice ringing out across the bridge, across the fleet. "Let's show these bastards what happens when you mess with Xyloth shipping. Let's show them what happens when you threaten our friends, our families, our way of life." A roar of agreement echoed back, 1,000 voices joined in defiance and courage. And then, with a blast of engines and a blaze of weapons fire, the battle began. It was a fight unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Ships wheeled and danced through the void, their hulls ablaze with the fire of 1,000 suns. Brave pilots hurled themselves into the fray, their skills and their sacrifices buying precious seconds for their comrades. And at the heart of it all, the Zephyr and the Retribution fought side by side, a dance of death and glory, the human and the Zilothian united as never before. Drax's flagship loomed before them, a monstrous construct of cruel angles and pulsing, sickly light. Jake gripped the controls, his knuckles white, his eyes narrowed in concentration. This was it. The final push, the last chance to end Drax's reign of terror once and for all. But even as they closed in, the warlord's voice crackled over the comm, harsh and mocking. "Foolish humans," he sneered. "You think you can defeat me? I am Draxa, the scourge of 1,000 star systems. I will crush you like the insects you are." Jake shared a glance with Nora and Amara, a wordless moment of understanding passing between them. They knew what they had to do. In a burst of speed and daring, the Zephyr surged forward, drawing the fire of the flagship's massive guns. The ship shuddered and groaned under the onslaught, its shields straining, its hull buckling. But it held, buying precious seconds for Nora and the Retribution to line up their shot. With a roar of triumph, the Terran ship unleashed a volley of quantum torpedoes, the devastating warheads slipping through a tiny gap in the flagship's shields, a vulnerability identified by Amara's keen strategic mind. The explosion was blinding, a sun born and dying in the blink of an eye. The flagship crumpled like tinfoil, its once mighty bulwarks shattering into a million glittering shards. And with it, the heart and soul of the Draxorian war effort collapsed, the rest of the fleet scattering like leaves before a hurricane. In the stunned silence that followed, Jake could only sit back in his chair, his heart racing, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They had done it. Against all odds, against all reason, they had emerged victorious. As the cheers of the crew washed over him, as Amara's hand found his and Nora's voice crackled over the comm in breathless congratulations, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the weight of responsibility, of fear, of uncertainty. For the first time since he had inherited Xyloth's legacy, he felt truly free. Free to chart his own course, to build a new future with the incredible women at his side. Free to explore the vast, uncharted expanse of space, not as a lone wanderer, but as part of something greater, something unbreakable. As the Zephyr and the Retribution set off into the starry depths, their hulls battered but their spirits unbroken, Jake knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever adventures and trials the galaxy had in store, they would face them together. For they were more than just a crew, more than just allies or friends. They were a family, bound by the unbreakable ties of love, of loyalty, of a shared dream that shone brighter than any star. And in the end, that was all that mattered. In the end, that was what would always guide them home, across the vast, beautiful expanse of the cosmos.